All right. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Hey, Elizabeth. Hey, good to see you on video. All right. Just give me a minute. I'm trying to connect to YouTube here. There we go. All right. Looks like I'm live on YouTube. All right. So, no, actually, let me record it on Zoom here. I think we'll be ready to go. All right. Well, welcome to this Save My Thyroid Q&A call. Thanks for joining me on this Tuesday evening, or at least where I am Tuesday evening. So some other where don't know if we have anybody from like Australia, New Zealand, where it would be morning, but um, actually feel free to let me know where you're Zooming from, or again on YouTube where you're tuning in from. So you could put that in the chat, and I'm going to go over a few quick announcements, and then we'll dive into your questions. Pretty much there's no presentation, so I did this on Saturday, and again just gave like 2 minutes worth of announcements, and just did about an hour worth of questions, and I'm going to pretty much do the same today if there is an hour worth of questions. And all right, and Kim from Florida, and Elizabeth, Los Angeles, California. And again, thanks for joining. And all right, so the announcements, hopefully you've checked out my podcast. And if you haven't, it's savemythyroid.com. And so the solo episodes, so pretty much it's a combination of solo episodes and interviews, guest interviews. So the solo episodes focus on hyperthyroidism just because there's a lot of information out there for hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's, but not a lot out there for hyperthyroidism Graves. So when I put the podcast together, the goal was to focus on hyperthyroidism. And that's really what most of the solo episodes focus on hyperthyroidism. But as far as the guest interviews, most of them, I'd say like 95% will benefit those with both hyperthyroidism and Hashimoto's. Today was actually an exception because there's one that the one that was released today was one on thyroid eye disease, which there are a small percentage of people with Hashimoto's with thyroid eye disease, but most of the people with thyroid eye disease have Graves' disease. And also want to let everyone know that February 14th, I'm having a free 5-day hyperthyroid healing diet challenge. I had it last year, was very successful, and was thinking about doing it later in the year, but figure beginning of the year, and a lot of people focusing on diet. On Saturday, I had people ask, like with Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, can they benefit from attending the challenge? I'd say about 80%. I mean, there's obviously overlap with Graves and Hashimoto's, just they're both autoimmune thyroid conditions. So there will be some information, obviously that's specific to hyperthyroidism, which is why it's called hyperthyroid healing. But if you have Hashimoto's, you can benefit from some of the information, and obviously it's free. So you could always sign up and check it out. And again, that'll be taking place February 14th. Registration details will be available by the end of the week. So Thursday or Friday of this week. And we got Ashley from Florida. So a couple of participants from Florida. And all right. So the way I did this on Saturday, and I'm going to start out doing it the same way here, is we're going to just start out using the chat. So my goal on Saturday was to use the chat and see, if we have an hour worth of questions in the chat. And if we didn't, I was open to like doing, unmuting people and all that. But honestly, I couldn't get to all the questions, even, went actually a little bit over an hour, and we still had people with unanswered questions. So my goal is to try to get to everybody's question at least one time. And, so if you have questions, so I'll ask you again, put it in the chat, and then I'll try to get to everybody at least once. And again, there's not a lot. It's not like there's, dozens or hundreds of people on this call. So again, I might actually get to everyone. Again, unlike Saturday, but we'll see how it goes. So again, hit me with your questions in the chat. Oh, and also with the chat, some people are more familiar with Zoom than others. So if you just send a general message in the chat, everybody could see the chat. Some people on Saturday would send like a direct message, a private message to me. So I still will read that out, but I just won't read the person's name. So if you don't want your name read, if you don't want your question seen, you could just send like a direct message to me. And again, I won't shout out your name, but I'll still read the question so everybody could benefit. All right, so Kim asks, what is the best way to regulate thyroid without prescriptions? So it depends on whether someone has hyperthyroidism or Hashimoto. So I don't know if you're what you're referring to, like, so Hashimoto's okay, yeah. That's what I thought. What hyperthyroidism, it's an easier response, because when I dealt with hyperthyroidism, I had Graves' disease and I didn't take the medication. Anti-thyroid medication is commonly recommended for those with hyperthyroidism, and I took the herbs. The problem with Hashimoto's is if someone has low thyroid hormone levels, there's not an herbal replacement for thyroid hormone. Now, there are herbs like, for example, ashwagandha that affects not the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, but then it also affects the HPT axis, which is the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis. So in some cases, people can take ashwagandha and it could stimulate the production of thyroid hormone. But again, Hashimoto's, you're getting the immune system damaging the thyroid gland. And, so ashwagandha is really not a long-term solution. So the goal, not everybody with Hashimoto's need to take thyroid hormone replacement, but a lot of my patients do. And, my goal is to try to get them to the point where they don't need it. Now, I'm not always successful with that, just because it depends on the extent of damage to the thyroid gland. But either way, the goal, since Hashimoto's is an immune system condition, the goal is to address someone else put a question in and kind of pushed this question up. So again, the goal is to address the autoimmune component, and you could learn more about it on my website, naturalendocrinesolutions.com. I have a book, Hashimoto's Triggers. And again, there's plenty of other resources. Isabella Wentz, probably most people with Hashimoto's are familiar with. She has a number of really good books on there. But again, if someone is lower in thyroid hormone, there's glandulars. There's natural, like if a lot of people will take levothyroxine, like, Synthroid. There's other options like desiccated thyroid. There's glandular. So if someone absolutely doesn't want to take like synthetic T4, there's other options. But if someone is trying to avoid thyroid hormone, and if their levels, if they're subclinical where TSH is elevated and T3, T4 are looking good, when they're not on medication, then they might not need to add the medication. But if someone's TSH is elevated and their T3, T4, are on the lower side, or, of course, outside of the reference range, then thyroid hormone is usually indicated. And again, the goal is hopefully it's temporary, but like I said, it really does depend on the person. Some people do need to stay on it. All right, so Colleen, what is the best way to supplement to open up pathways to get lymph moving if you have MTHFR? So MTHFR, so actually I have the MTHFR variation. So MTHFR, for those who are not familiar, there's a common genetic variation, and I don't want to get too in detail with MTHFR. Actually, on my website, again, Natural Endocrine Solutions, you could type in MTHFR, and I do have an article on there. But and MTHFR does relate to like methylation which is part of phase 2 detoxification. And also in my case, I had elevated homocysteine, which you could test in the blood. and that was due to my MTHFR. I had what's called the C677T homozygous variation, and so I mean, what I do for a lymph, to get my lymph moving is, there's no, I wouldn't say supplements. I really don't take supplements for lymphatic support unless if I'm doing like a detox, which coincidentally, I'm actually doing a homeopathic detox from the company Desbio, DESBIO. And that it's an 8-week detox. I actually just started yesterday, and was going to start a few weeks ago, but dealt with COVID, and so put my detox on hold. But just started yesterday, and again, that supports liver, that supports lymphatics, that supports kidneys. So again, that's but it's not something I do continuously. So what I do continuously is rebounding. A rebounder, many of you I'm sure know, but it's like a mini trampoline. So that's what I do on a regular basis. Try to do it at least a few days a week. Actually, did it yesterday, and yeah. So that's the way I recommend to support lymphatics. Okay, and Colleen, you have the 1298C. Yeah, so the 1298C, it's a little, it's different than the C677T, but yeah, as far as lymphatics go, it doesn't really make a difference. I would say rebounding, but if you want to get, and you don't have to do the whole Desbio I should say there are other, Apex Energetics has a line where they, of homeopathy, where they have some lymphatic support, so I've taken that before, if you want to rely more on supplements. And there's actually, I think, I don't know if everybody's on my email list. Well, actually, yeah, those on Zoom, you should be. That's so pretty much everybody should be on my email list on Zoom. So, I sent out on Tuesday. So today, I sent out the Save My Thyroid update, and there's in March, I actually, in like the future events, there's a gallbladder and lymphatic summit coming up. So if you're interested in supporting more of the, lymphatics and gallbladder, you might want to sign up for that. Again, that's a free event. So Kim asked, coconut oil, any input? I mean, I like coconut oil. I mean, for cooking, I guess is, cooking, and I use it for oil pulling, swishing it in my mouth for oral health. I don't really recommend it to eat it. Like I actually used to add coconut oil a little bit to my smoothie, but it kind of ruined my smoothie. And but yeah, again, yeah. So I don't know if you have any specific questions with coconut oil, but yeah, mainly I recommend it for cooking. And again, I use it for oil pulling. All right, so we have a direct message. So again, I'll read so nobody else should be able to see the question, but I'll read it out without reading the person's name. So having a hard time with palpitations recently, do you suggest the motherwort only for this? So motherwort is my number one go-to for palpitations. When I dealt with Graves, I took bugleweed, and that helped, but I was still having palpitations, and I added the motherwort. The dosing is important too. In my case, I took a 1 to 2 extract, and I took a teaspoon twice per day. Some people will need take a teaspoon 3 times a day. Another good herb for palpitations and cardiovascular support is hawthorn, HAWTHORN, and Gaia herbs, GAIA, which they're available in many health food stores. They actually have a good brand, good quality hawthorn. Okay, so next question, Anna Lou. Hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. So recently, my T4 dose was increased because my T3 was low. My result was 3 in a range of 2.8 to 4.4 picograms per milliliter. So your T4, okay, so T4 dose was increased, and then your T3 was at 3, which is with that reference range kind of on the lower side. Now my sex hormone binding globulin serum is high now, 164.4. With the sex hormone binding globulin go back to normal if the T4 is reduced. Yeah, actually, hyperthyroidism, not that you have hyperthyroidism, but if T4, if someone's taking too much T4, it will increase sex hormone binding globulin. That's actually pretty common. Like I deal with a lot of hyperthyroid patients, and sex hormone binding globulin is almost always elevated. So chances are now, yeah, if your T3 is low, it's kind of odd that your I shouldn't say it's odd, because that's what conventional doctors do. A lot of times they're scared of giving T3, but if your T3 was low, and you might have a problem converting T4 into T3. So, to me, it makes sense to, well, a couple of things. One, maybe take T3, like there's, like ask your doctor about Cytomel. There's also glandulars, like Biotics Research has one, GTA or GTA Forte, which has some T3. So maybe, work with a practitioner, about taking that. Another thing you would want to do is try to, if someone has a problem converting T4 to T3, to address the cause of the conversion problem. Most of the conversion of T4 T3 takes place in the liver. 60% approximately takes place in the liver, then another 20% in the gut. So focusing on liver and gut, is a good place to start for conversion problems. I know that's not your question, but again, just trying to give you a little bit more information, just because, T3 was low, but they gave more T4. And yeah, so really you want to focus on T3 and, focus on helping conversion. All right. Any other questions? Okay, Elizabeth, what was the name of the 8-week homeopathic detox you mentioned that you're going to start? How many times a year do you recommend that we should detoxify using supplements? I'll put it in the chat so everybody could see. It's Des Bio. Actually, I don't know if this is the exact name of it, but actually, that's right. It's the Omni Cleanse. Actually. Okay, so just put that in the chat. And as far as how many times a year do you recommend that we should detoxify using supplements? I mean, I would say probably once a year. I do it I do it 3 or 4 times a year, not with the not with the Omni Cleanse. Usually, so the Omni Cleanse I started a few years ago. I just about 2 years ago. So this is like the 3rd time I'm doing it. So I try to do it like once a year, and then I do like a 3-week detox using Apex Energetics has some supplements. So that I'll do a few times per year. So I think even if most people do like a 3-week detox once a year, that's really good. So again, I don't want to say I'll overdo it, but I'm very aggressive when it comes to detoxification, just because we live in a toxic world. I don't know if I need to do that every quarter, or sometimes I only do it like 3 times a year, but still that's more than most people. But, so most people don't do it at all. So once a year is a good place to start. And that's how I started. It's not like I always did 3 or 4, years ago, I would just do like once a year. And I'm like, you know what, I'll start, doing a couple a year, and then just, and I probably will keep it at 3 or 4. So I don't think I'll be doing like one every month or every other month. But But yeah, so Adrian, is there a relationship between with Hashimoto's and osteoporosis? I mean, honestly, more so with hyperthyroidism. So hyperthyroidism, Graves' disease, that affects bone density more. Low thyroid. So if someone has Hashimoto's and they're not taking thyroid hormone, if their thyroid hormone levels remain low, it definitely could affect bone quality. I actually interviewed, I think it was last week actually, or maybe the week before, but one of the recent episodes on my podcast, I interviewed Margie Bissinger, who is a physical therapist that focuses on bone health, and so she spoke about bone density, and so hyperthyroidism, without question, that has more of an impact, but low thyroid hormone also, will affect. Will also have an impact as well. So yeah. So I wouldn't say what osteoporosis is, definitely more advanced than osteopenia. And so I would say if you're not taking thyroid hormone, and if it's over a period of years, it potentially could lead to that. But if you're managing the low thyroid hormone levels, or anyway, if as long as your thyroid hormone levels aren't too low for a prolonged period of time, it shouldn't lead to osteoporosis. So, and Elizabeth, you are welcome. Okay, so Elaine, I took T3 for over. Actually, is that hold on just a sec. Okay. So I took T3 for over a year and it worked well, but then I hit menopause and went on a gluten-free diet, and I started getting hyper symptoms, lots of dizziness, weight gain, palpitations, sweating. I also gained some weight in the beginning when I first started taking it. Why would this happen after so long? So I took T3 for over a year. So that's weird that it started after a gluten-free diet. And yeah, I agree. It's kind of unusual that after a year, unless if you are, well, actually maybe not. So if if someone has, let's say Hashimoto. So Hashimoto's, again, one of the potential triggers, food triggers, is gluten. So, if you were taking T3, for over a year, and then, you took out gluten from your diet, and if that was a potential trigger, and that kind of calmed down the autoimmune response, and that, and then the immune system not attacking the thyroid gland. So not everybody has that effect when they avoid gluten, but I definitely recommend going gluten-free for my patients. But that definitely would be an explanation if it happened after the gluten-free diet. You removed the trigger, your immune system health improved, and you didn't need the same amount of T3 because of that. So that would be my explanation. And Elaine, my antibodies came down. Yeah, so that's what it sounds like. You avoided gluten. Again, your immune system improved. And yeah, my T3 is still considered low, 2.2. Yeah, so 2.2. Some labs would still have that within a range. Some labs have the reference range like 2 to like 4. Others, it's like 2.3 to 4.3. But either way, yeah, definitely on the lower side. And if I don't know what your T4 is, but a lot of people do have that conversion problems converting T4 to T3. All right, so Analu, folks who have been diagnosed with Hashimoto's need to avoid eggs, nightshades, any other foods. I avoid gluten, grains, dairy. I temporarily, not permanently. Some will say eggs, like permanently. I'm not one who says that, but if you're following AIP, autoimmune paleo, which again, it's not a permanent diet, then you're avoiding gluten, you're avoiding dairy, you are avoiding grains, you're avoiding eggs, you're avoiding nightshades. And again, if it's strict AIP, you're avoiding nuts and seeds. But eventually the goal is to reintroduce the foods. So again, like eggs and I mean, really, not most of these. Again, while restoring your health, especially the like gluten and dairy, and arguably, like some will say, to avoid gluten permanently, which probably is a good idea. I've been in remission from Graves since 2008, and for the most part, I avoid gluten, but I can't say I have not had any gluten exposures since then. Dairy, I definitely do still consume. Won't be during my 8-week detox, but when I don't drink cow's milk or anything like that. But if I have pizza, it's usually gluten free, but the cheese is not dairy free. So all right. So this direct message. So again, I won't read the person's name, but I'll read the question. Is a vegan diet okay for hypothyroidism for a bit though? Yeah, I mean, there's not one diet that fits everyone. So AIP, autoimmune paleo diet, it doesn't mean everybody has to follow that diet. I mean, some people follow a regular paleo diet and they do okay. Some people, they don't, and then they need to make the transition to AIP. For vegans, vegetarians, I usually recommend Dr. Stephen Gundry's plant paradox diet. So, which, because again, vegan diet, if a vegan tries following AIP, pretty much they'll only be able to eat vegetables and fruits and, a few other things, but very difficult. So Gundry's diet, if those who are not familiar with plant paradox, it's actually a book called The Plant Paradox, which interesting book, because Dr. Gundry acknowledges that, even though he recommends a plant-based diet, he acknowledges that plants, just again, can have a negative effect on the gut health due to the compounds like lectins in the food. So the plant paradox, pretty much you're avoiding the foods high in lectin. So for example, really most grains are eliminated, but he does allow pressure cooked legumes. He does allow certain nuts, such as like macadamia nuts, walnuts, pecans, and pistachios. So Elaine, is it true that T4 only therapy does not work for most hypo Hashimoto's patients? I don't know if I'd say for most, but for a lot of patients, it doesn't. I mean, I do have patients who just take T4 and they do fine. So I don't want to say most, but there are a lot of patients where it doesn't work, where they do a lot better taking, T4 and T3, or desiccated thyroid. All right, Anna Lou, you are very welcome. All right. Almost at the 30-minute mark. Any other questions? So Elaine, will upping my vitamin D help with conversion to T4 to T3? Not that I know of. Vitamin D has a lot of benefits, but I don't know of any evidence. And again, it could be that maybe I'm just not aware of it, because again, it does a lot of things, but I'm not, I don't think increase in vitamin D will help with the T4 to T3 conversion. Now, you want healthy vitamin D levels, so it's not going to hurt to, to get usually vitamin D, like to see it at least over 50. Some sources say between 60 and 80. If it's already in that range, I wouldn't try to get it higher than that. And if it's not in that range, again, I don't think it'll help with convert. Like if someone's like 30 or 40, I don't think getting it in the 50s or 60s will help with conversion, but I could be wrong. and it's not going to hurt. If anything, it'll be beneficial to get it, in those levels, the 50s, 60s. Also, for those who take vitamin D, again, some of you already know this, but not everybody. It's a good idea to also add vitamin K2, because vitamin D helps with intestinal absorption of calcium. And a lot of people are K2 deficient, which you can't really, there's no good test to test for that, but it's pretty safe to take K2. So taking K2 will help to guide the calcium into the bone. And I have a website. I have on my website an article on vitamin K, which talks about K1 and K2. But so I would, check out my website. And Adrian asked which K2, MK7 or MK4 or both. No, I wouldn't say both. I think either one. Usually, like one of the one of the formulations I recommend, Thorne Research, they have D3, K2, and they use like MK4. And I think for every 1,000 micrograms of 1,000 IUs of vitamin D3, I think there's I think they have 100 micrograms of the MK4. When MK7, apparently you don't need too much for like, so for example, like Zymogen, they have like their D3, K2, and their K2 is MK7, and they use, I think, like, for like their 5,000 IU vitamin D, only like 50 micrograms of the K2. But I think either one is fine. So Jessica, how to increase TSH? T3 and T4 was in range last time, but TSH non-existent. So visit my podcast, savemythyroid.com, which is on the screen here. You know what? I forgot my YouTubers. I gotta go and answer some YouTube questions. forgot I'm live streaming to YouTube too. So after this, I'll go to YouTube. But so let me bring up that question again. Because I just yeah. So TSH. So Jessica, I have on my podcast, I released a separate episode on on TSH, and it's the thing is about TSH, it takes a while. There's no so to answer your question again, I would visit my website and check, or visit my podcast, check out my podcast episode. But it takes a while. It's very common for people with hyperthyroidism for that TSH to sometimes it takes like 3-4 months. Sometimes it takes over 6 months. And if someone could take something like bugleweed to increase it, but if the T3 and T4 is looking really good, I usually don't recommend that. I just recommend to focus on improving your health overall. If T3 and T4 are well within range, eventually TSH will start increasing. But again, it could take quite a while. And like I said, I do have a podcast episode that focuses on that. All right, so we have a couple of questions on YouTube. So B says, "Hi, Dr. Eric. Thank you for your hard work. You are very welcome. I'm a big fan of your books and podcasts. Do you plan any joint interview with Dr. Isabella Wentz?" So yeah, Isabella Wentz, I think she's kind of retired. We did I guess it was 2015 is I think when we first met in 2015, and we did like we interviewed each other, and then I attended, like, she had like a little get together. She called it like a thyroid mastermind, where I met like Dr. Alan Christensen and Dr. Tatis Karazian and like all these other like people who focus on thyroid health. And then she had a thyroid documentary, so she interviewed me and like a lot of other people for that too. But no, yeah, Isabella, Dr. Isabella, I mean, she still sends out emails and all that, but yeah, I don't know if she really does any interviews. So, but maybe in the future, maybe I'll reach out to her again, and see if she wants to be on my podcast or. So Pamela, is it possible one day to go off of thyroid medication of Hashimoto? So yeah, I don't know if you heard earlier, so someone asked that, and it is possible. Again, it depends on the person. Not all my patients are able to get off thyroid hormone. So I wouldn't give up hope, because some people do get off thyroid hormone. But again, with Hashimoto's, like I said, focus on that immune system. And then Anna Lou, I have palpitations sometimes. Any ideas why this is happening? Well, again, it depends on if you have hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism. Hyperthyroidism very common. So with hypothyroidism, again, it could have palpitations also if thyroid gets too low, but then also it could happen with imbalances in sex hormones. Progesterone gets too low, estrogen, problems with estrogen metabolism. So Ashley, I'm trying to increase my vitamin D levels. How often should I have a vitamin D blood test done to monitor levels? If you're actively trying to increase it and get to I'm at the point where, my levels are typically upper 50s, lower 60s. And, I take 5,000 IUs per day. I try to get some sunlight too, but I can't, that's still something I need to improve. I was actually doing pretty good for a while, but, it's also colder out there now in North Carolina. But I would say every 3 months. And then once you're like, I do it once a year because now my levels pretty much stay in, like I said, upper 50s, low 60s. So I just do it once a year. But if someone is active, trying to increase it, monitoring, I'd say like every 3-4 months. All right, Lori, what are your thoughts on CBD for inflammation and how would it impact the thyroid? I take a full spectrum USDA certified organic version to help with other autoimmune conditions. My thyroid numbers have improved dramatically. Antibodies down to 23 from 332. I also did the diet stuff, no gluten, sugar, dairy. I'd love to put dairy back in though. So CBD, I mean, I've seen mixed results. I mean, I like CBD, but more so for sleep and like anxiety. And, for sleep and anxiety, but I've seen it also help people with inflammation and antibodies and some people with thyroid eye disease, but then others where it's not having that impact, where it's not, having an impact on on the antibodies. And again, you're doing other things too. So we're not 100% sure if it's due to CBD, but it doesn't, from what I understand, it doesn't affect thyroid directly. But again, if someone has Graves or Hashimoto's, if they have an autoimmune thyroid condition, then if it's having a positive effect on the thyroid, then it could, indirectly affect the thyroid by having a positive benefit on the immune system. And yeah, as far as adding dairy back, I mean, I would ideally recommend being in remission first. Not everybody does, waits until they're in remission, but and then if someone's in remission, slowly add it back, like different types of dairy, and see how you respond, retest the antibodies. I mean, you could do it. Sarah Ballantyne, who is a founder of the autoimmune paleo diet, and so she has like 4 stages of reintroductions. So like if someone's following AIP for 3 months, they go through the stages of reintroduction, and she does recommend like ghee, which has very minimal proteins of dairy, but ghee is reintroduced in the first stage. And then other forms of dairy, I don't think are introduced until stage 4 though, like the later stages. So I could be wrong. Butter, so there's ghee, which is clarified butter, but regular butter might be reintroduced sooner. I forgot. So Jessica, we'll check out that podcast. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's, I think it was from earlier this year. It wasn't, I mean, I'm still a fairly new podcast, so there's not a lot of episodes. There's, I've been doing weekly episodes every Tuesday, like full episodes, and even the full episodes sometimes are short, but then every other Thursday. So this Thursday, I got to remember I got to release a Q&A episode. So that was part of a Q&A episode. So it was like 5-6 minutes. And it's, I think the title is like, how long does it take for TSH to increase? So, so Elaine, do you recommend taking iodine for hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's? So usually not. I mean, there's definitely different perspectives on iodine. So there's, I mentioned Dr. Datis Karazian, who's definitely against iodine, and Dr. Alan Christensen actually wrote a book recently, the Thyroid Reset Diet, whereas really everything is against taking iodine for those with hypothyroidism. He recommends like 200 micrograms or less per day. And then there's, Dr. Brownstein, who, for years has recommended, taking iodine. So I'm definitely not against iodine. Like I'm not anti-iodine, but the problem is that iodine, a lot of people don't have the antioxidants to handle iodine. You just don't know how people, and I spoke about this. You could check out my book, Hashimoto's Triggers. And I also wrote about it in my website. If you visit naturalendocrinesolutions.com and type in iodine, you'll see some articles. But Hashimoto's Triggers, I have an entire chapter talking about iodine, how it could be, even though it could be helpful in some cases, in other cases, it could exacerbate the autoimmune response if someone has Hashimoto's. So, So yeah, you definitely want to be cautious. And then Lori, who's taking a CBD oil, has Hashimoto's, and you are welcome. So yeah, I'm glad it seems to be helping again with everything else. Okay, so Analu, thank you for answering our questions. What is the name of your podcast? So the podcast, it's actually up on the screen. So the podcast is or it should be. You should, if you, hopefully everybody's seeing the the PowerPoint, but yeah, Save My Thyroid. Okay, great. So Lori, thank you for putting it. SaveMyThyroid.com, and then click. You could click on podcast or just click on the link. um, all right, great. And let's see. So YouTube, we got B with another question. Dr. Eric, could you please briefly explain relationship between Hashimoto's and tetany? So I can't say I see a common relationship with, as far as, tetany and, with the Hashimoto's patients. So, as far as like, you talk about like spasms and, yeah, like I said, that's not something, what I would look into if someone has tetany, honestly, with Hashimoto's or Graves', typically I would look into like stealth infections, like Lyme disease and all that. So that's what I would say. But let's see. All right, I am taking CBG isolates powder with great results. So Adrian, I'm taking CBG isolates powder with great results for inflammation and neuro pain. Cool. Okay, well, thanks for sharing. Okay, so how do you reduce a goiter? I have antibodies for Graves' and Hashimoto's. Last labs, I'm not sure. So T4 0.4. Okay, I'm not sure what the labs mean. Which, yeah, that. So you mean TAG, like thyroglobulin antibody? Yeah, maybe you could clarify what the antibodies. But as far as goiter goes, again, I've written articles on goiter, and I'm talking. Goiter is enlargement of the thyroid gland, and so goiter. I mean, any inflammation in general could cause goiter, but with goiter and nodules, okay, so TSH, okay, TSH is 13, which is pretty, yeah, so TSH is pretty high. So definitely lowering that TSH, so if someone has hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism, that can cause problems, with, so that could cause problems with, I'm sorry, I'm blanking out here. So TSH, hyperthyroidism. I had actually a mild goiter when I dealt with hyperthyroidism, but elevated thyroid hormone levels can also affect thyroid hormone levels. And then, yeah, as far as estrogen, problems with estrogen metabolism could be a factor. Problems with insulin resistance. Iodine. We spoke about iodine before, which is controversial. Again, but in some cases, iodine can help with goiter. It's, again, not the first thing I would do, just because some people would get worse with that. But yeah, TSH of 13. So TSH 13, and then T4. I'm assuming 0.4. 0.4 is pretty low. So you need to get that. Free T4. Ideally, you want to see like between 1 and 1.5. Some will want to see it even a little bit higher than 1.5. So yeah, definitely want to address that. I'm going to actually stop the share here. And all right. So are there other questions? Again, I'll go another 15 minutes if necessary, if there's 15 minutes worth of questions, and call it a night. So I was trying to do a search, tetany and thyroid, because again, I don't think there's, so there's tetany. Actually, let me see if I could. Because again, I don't know the direct relationship, but let me actually, I'll share since there's no other questions. So quick search of tetany. And again, so tetany again, not with, I don't think there's a relationship between tetany and thyroid, but tetany and hypoparathyroidism over here we see. So, I mean, you could test like PTH and then, actually, so tetany and autoimmune thyroid. Yeah, again, just a hypoparathyroidism there. Yeah, again, like I said, with tetany, like Lyme. Actually, let's see, PubMed, that's what I. All right, anyway, so let's see if there's any, no other questions. So let's see on YouTube. All right, so sorry to keep asking, having suppressed TSH due to medication is bad. So, yeah, it depends on who you ask. I don't think it's a good thing. I think if your TSH is on the lower side, one could argue maybe not too bad, but if TSH is depressed, like if it's really low and undetectable, then you're probably taking too much thyroid hormone. Again, there's a lot of debate, you know, so there's some doctors who claim that's definitely not the case, but you know, then there are doctors who claim, you know, we actually had this conversation during the one Margie, when I spoke with her about bone density. And so she was talking about when you take too much thyroid hormone, it could have a negative effect on more so bone density. I mean, if you're not feeling hyper symptoms, and if if your heart rate's fine, I probably wouldn't worry about like anything cardiovascular. So the bigger concern, you know, is the bone density. And someone asked a question: how does hypothyroidism affect bone density? So hypothyroidism affects more bone quality than it affects the, so it so hyperthyroidism actually decreases like the bone density, but hypothyroidism, so I mean, essentially hypo and hyper can affect bone density, but you know, it's also the quality of the bone too. I mean, either way, if your thyroid is too high or too low for a long period of time, it could increase your fracture risk. Fracture risk. And then you know, I wrote an article not probably like a few years ago on the, you know, thyroid autoimmunity and osteoporosis, and really it was eye-opening because the inflammation associated with these autoimmune conditions was also a factor, maybe even a greater factor than the thyroid hormone imbalance. So it's not just having thyroid hormones that are too high or too low, but the inflammatory component also could affect bone density. All right. Why don't we do last call for questions? Any final questions? All right, so this is a direct message, so I'm the only one who could see it. What is your opinion of MRI with contrast for eye health? Earth metal contrast? I have never been asked that question. When I saw contrast, I thought you were going to ask about contrast agents, like, the iodine contrast agents, which definitely there's controversy with that. Actually, you know what? I need to, I was going to do a podcast episode on that, iodine contrast agents. And then there's other agents also, which could be risky, but I'm not sure what I don't know if I understand the question. So your opinion of MRI with contrast for eye health, like is it like the earth metal contrast having a negative effect on eye health? I'm not sure what you're, haven't been asked that question. Okay, Elaine, thank you. This was great. You are welcome. I'm glad I actually got to, again, like I said, Saturday, I went overtime. I'm not gonna go past 9:30 because I want to go to sleep by 10, but I went like 10, 15 minutes over the hour on Saturday and still didn't get to a question. So Vanessa, how do you reduce a goiter? So I just mentioned it, just like balance the thyroid hormone levels, address insulin resistance if that's a problem, or estrogen metabolism problems if that's an issue. Again, I've written an article. There'll also be, there's a podcast episode on toxic multinodular goiter. There will be just eventually one just on goiter, like regular goiter. Yeah. So as far as the iodine, I mean the contrast, so non-iodine, but to detect Graves' eye disease. I've not heard of doing the MRI, to doing that, with using earth metal contrast to detect thyroid eye disease. That's interesting. I've not. I'm actually going to write that down and see what. So thyroid eye disease, earth MRI, earth metal contrast. I would think in most cases it's not necessary. Usually like just going, like many people kind of know, like just, what the symptoms they're having. But if someone, if it's not as obvious, a lot of times going to an ophthalmologist. So yeah, so I don't, I can't say I would recommend for most people to get an MRI to see if they have thyroid eye disease. All right, Lori, thanks again. Looking forward to learning more next time. You are welcome. Yeah, I think I don't know when, but I have the challenge coming up the 14th, so definitely going to be a crazy couple of weeks, but I'm hoping to do like one more. I just don't know like when, like if it'll be a day one or an evening one. And I'm also on Facebook regularly, which I know not everybody's on Facebook, which is again is why I'm also doing these Zoom calls and to YouTube. Just taking a break from Facebook, and let's see. So no more calls on YouTube. No more questions on YouTube, and then on. Let's see, another question. This is another direct message, so nobody else could see it, but Adrian, you are very welcome for answering your questions. So if one's been through menopause decades ago, can one still have estrogen imbalance? Meaning, should they still have a certain level of estrogen in their body? When someone has postmenopause, when someone's in postmenopause, the estrogen, usually is on the lower side. But someone could still have problems with estrogen metabolism. And the only test that I know of that could look at that is in the urine. There's a test called the Dutch test, dried urine testing, that looks at the estrogen metabolites. So someone could still have problems with estrogen metabolism, even if they've been in menopause for many years. And yeah, you'll still have estrogen. Like, it's not like estrogen will be depleted completely. Now, I will also say that, so there, like when it comes to postmenopause, there's, the postmenopausal levels of estrogen. So obviously someone in postmenopause is not going to have the same levels as a cycling woman. But if someone has compromised adrenals, like adrenals that are really in bad shape, then their estrogen levels, as well as potentially their other sex hormones, are going to be really low. So I guess so two things. One, try to optimize your adrenal health, maybe test for adrenals, again, doing like Dutch tests or saliva testing. And then again, someone can have problems with estrogen metabolism. So that's the advantage. When I dealt with Graves, I did saliva testing, and a lot of my patients do saliva testing still. But the advantage of just Dutch tests is that it'll look at cortisol levels, circadian rhythm of cortisol. So we'll look at adrenals, but also we'll look at estrogen metabolism. All right, Vanessa, can you recommend a multivitamin? I like Designs for Health. They have a good twice daily, and they also have a good regular one that's like a 4 times a day. And that's the thing about multivitamins. I know there's like the one a day, Centrum and all these at one a day. So you're not going to get everything from one a day. Even the twice daily multi doesn't have everything in there. So the 4 times a day to some people, sounds like a lot, but that's again, that's just a most good quality multivitamins are gonna, you're gonna be taking multiple, like 2 to 4 per day. Some of them even more than that. I've seen multivitamins where you're taking like 8, per day. But yeah, so I like Designs for Health. Thorne Research also has pretty good multivitamin. All right. Well, I think I'm going to call it a night. So I know we're at a few minutes early, but again, looks like we're out of questions. So again, everybody, actually, all right, we have one more. This is going to be the last one. I've been seeing a neurologist and ophthalmologist for 6 months. Was told I had idiopathic intracranial hypertension. Prescribed Diamox. Had small change in vision, but only per vision and random. My thyroid was normal 6 months ago. Tested again and was 0.005. Now they're saying it's Graves. I have no idea if I was misdiagnosed. Now 6 months later, the ophthalmologist wants to do MRI. I feel like they are throwing things to see what sticks. I'm on Diamox. 6 months later, thyroid gone. Thanks for listening. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know. I guess so thyroid was normal 6 months ago. Tested again and it was 0.005. Now they're saying Graves. I mean, definitely, if you haven't done so, I would test the antibodies for Graves, thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins. If it's elevated, if it's elevated, then you have, those are the antibodies for Graves. If it's negative, then, I mean, you can have false negatives, but most people are positive. And then, yeah, as far as the ophthalmologist want to do an MRI, I mean, I guess I would get another opinion from a different ophthalmologist. So TSI was tested. So 11 TRAB, yeah. So TRAB, that's elevated. Most labs, it's like 1.75 or below. So 11 would be pretty high. So yeah, so it does sound like you do have Graves. So again, I don't know why they would want to do an MRI. And again, I would say go to a different ophthalmologist. So. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen higher, but 11 is clearly like it's not mildly high. I would say it's moderately high. So yeah. So Jeff, you are welcome. Analu, you are welcome. Again, everyone, thanks for your questions. Hope you have a wonderful night. And again, hope to see some of you at the challenge that I'll be having. And again, like I said, I'm going to try to do at least one more of these over the next couple of weeks. And again, there'll be others in the future. But anyway, everyone have a great rest of your night and a great week ahead. And I'll catch you soon. Take care, everyone.